Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hope you're having an amazing day. The next generation of Xbox hardware has certainly had a lot of rumours swirling, and one of the more persistent rumours is that Microsoft are working on a portable Xbox. I believe Jez Corden was one of the first to really say this out loud, and it would actually have the Microsoft Surface team heading up the development. Now, I've personally heard that there was also going to be a flagship system as well, and others have reported much the same thing. This flagship system, of course, would be a very traditional console, i.e. it would sit and connect to your TV. But yeah, of course, with all of these rumours, eventually there was going to be confirmation one way or another, and it seems that we actually have that in the form of Phil Spencer himself. Now, there is a pretty lengthy interview with Polygon that was conducted at GDC, which of course has just recently taken place, and there were a lot of nuggets actually disclosed during this interview, including the fact that Microsoft may actually open up the Xbox ecosystem to allow third-party stores such as Epic and Steam to even sell games on the console, which has a lot of very interesting ramifications when you think about how the traditional console model works in terms of profits being made essentially through software as well as peripherals as well. We're going to get into all of that plus more after this quick message from the sponsor of the video. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they've an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. So, Phil Spencer has now stated that this next generation of Xbox development is being headed up by Roanne Soanes. Hopefully I've pronounced her name correctly. If not, I apologise to the person. I kind of suck sometimes with name pronunciation. And Phil Spencer kind of was talking a little bit about the Lenovo Go, which if you're unfamiliar is a little bit like the Steam Deck. It's basically like a portable PC device, which of course has become really popular again since the release of the Steam Deck. Now basically he was saying that he was essentially looking at the device and trying to figure out what actually is good and what isn't so good about the device, and he essentially said that one of the big problems he had are things like, well, it just isn't maybe as good in terms of the software, like a whole cohesive unit. And he also mentioned things like it would be great to have cross saves on games, and ironically he brought up Fallout 76, and I say ironically of course because, well, you know, they kind of could do something about that if they wanted. And he also focused of course on saying that the ecosystem of the device is perhaps the most important. I won't read out the entire interview, but you can see of course excerpts of it on screen anyway if you want to just pause the video and kind of get a better understanding of what Phil Spencer is coming from. Now honestly, this actually has a lot of interesting potentials for Microsoft, and I honestly could see this being actually very profitable for them, particularly if it did other stuff as well. For example, if it was able to fit into a travel bag and then you were able to plug that into like a TV, which of course you'd probably be able to do, like a dockable system, that would make a lot of sense. Maybe you could then either play it, you know, kind of like this. Actually I realised it one on camera, you know, kind of you know, looking at the screen, and it would obviously connect to a HDMI, or maybe you could even plug in a keyboard and mouse if you wanted, so again it could be portable, but maybe it could also do other things and could kind of act like a gaming laptop in some ways. Maybe you could do, I don't know, like Word documents on it if you so desired. And I do think that that would actually be potentially a really cool kind of scenario for Microsoft. Now obviously, it would be down a lot to the marketing, the ecosystem, how it was actually performing in terms of specification. It will be interesting to, as well, whether they would have iterative hardware. So, for example, every couple of years there would be a more powerful version of it. Who knows, honestly. I would be very interested, though, to see what Microsoft plans are, particularly given another rumor that has been absolutely swirling, and that is that Microsoft are kind of working on some type of Xbox HyperVisor. Now, for this rumour, I'm going to really simplify what a HyperVisor is. I've gone over this more extensively in a couple of videos, so I'm just going to give you the Cliff Notes version, and I would, of course, encourage you guys to check it out, so I do some Googling, but basically think of a hypervisor as kind of a much more advanced virtual machine. Basically, it can emulate, essentially, in software, what another piece of hardware can do. So, for example, you can have a hypervisor that would pretty much mirror the capabilities of an original Xbox, or the capabilities of an Xbox 360, and so on and so forth. And this obviously would be pretty interesting for a lot of reasons. There were even some reports I heard, and frankly don't know if they're true, so I would take this with so much salt it would fill the Grand Canyon, that you would even be able to have that potentially on competitor hardware, and that would allow, let's say, the PS5 to play, let's say, original Xbox games, which could be an interesting monetization strategy. Of course, there are some issues still with that for a lot of reasons, but it would be a very interesting option for Microsoft, particularly when you look at the Xbox Series S hardware, when you look at how the GPU, I'm just going to round the figures here, but it's roughly speaking about 40 flops of GPU. The CPU is Zen 2, and honestly, it wouldn't be too difficult by like 2026, 2027 for any portable device, really, that's kind of, roughly within the specification range of a then modern device to be able to emulate that hardware. Strix's Point would easily be able to do that most likely, and that's releasing later this year, and God knows what's going to happen in a couple of generations' time. So I will be very interested to see what this actually could bring to the table. As for the flagship console, I've heard it's based on RDNA 5 and Zen 5, but what does that matter anyway, given the fact that when you are talking about, of course, console IPs, you can basically have mixtures of hardware, so it doesn't matter. Like the PS5 Pro is based on RDNA 3, RDNA 4, that's what I was leaking, and it seems now to be true, with documents that have popped up from like Eurogamer. So yeah, like saying Zen 5 based, it's like, yeah, it could have some elements of Zen 6, or RDNA 5 based, okay, well Microsoft could have done a bunch of like their own customizations, or maybe it's got some RDNA 6 in it, who the hell knows. But I suspect it's going to be a very interesting piece of hardware, especially given the fact that they have said that the next generation is going to be the biggest technical leap ever, which is a very bold statement, let's just say, given obviously we've had such large leaps in the past with like the N64 to the GameCube, or the PS1 to the PS2, what have you. I do think that a lot of this is going to be down to like machine learning, AI, and just, well, obvious advancements moving forward, but as always, it's going to be interesting to see what is officially confirmed. Speaking of officially confirmed, Phil Spencer has also said that they are considering, or at the very least they're talking, it seems, about internally, actually opening up the ecosystem for the Xbox. Now, obviously, essentially, if you own an Xbox console, or you own a PS5, let's take piracy out of the equation for a moment, you ultimately have two ways that you can basically play a game that you buy. One is a physical disc, and two, well, is a digital download. Now, when it comes to the digital download, of course, that is a Microsoft store. And what basically happens in either case, whether it's a digital download or a physical disc, if you're buying, let's say, a Capcom game, Capcom gets some of the profits, and some of those also, of course, as you know, get sent to Microsoft, and basically that's how the console market has existed for so long. Basically, Microsoft give a license, or Sony give a license, or Nintendo, or Sega back in the day, to allow third-party developers to basically release a game or publish a game on the system, and then obviously they get a cut of each of the copies sold for a specific game. And then, of course, that means that they can sell the hardware for a loss, and then later on, obviously they eventually, hopefully, get into profitability, because obviously you've got not only the research and development costs and marketing costs of the console, but each console that's actually sold actually ends up costing Microsoft money. Obviously, it does depend on the device and, you know, the year and inflation and a bunch of other stuff, but it could be like $100 they lose, $200, $300 or whatever per console sold. And that's the same again with Sony, Microsoft and so on. So, if they were to open up the ecosystem to Epic and Steam, how would that work? Like, I'm not crapping on the idea, because ultimately they may still get a cut of the profits. I don't know. But it's a very interesting question, because theoretically it could turn the console dynamic completely on its head. I'm not against it necessarily. I just would wonder how it's going to be profitable. Maybe they're going to have like an iterative hardware, you know, thing. But I don't know. Like, I will be very, like, there's not enough information to draw a solid conclusion. You could certainly go down a lot of paths, but again, without more of a statement or more kind of solid idea of what actually they're doing, it's very hard to be like, this is a terrible idea or this is a really good idea. I mean, I could see how it would encourage developers to release games on the hardware, or like Valve or whatever, but then they're also not getting a cut of those profits. It's certainly a very different approach to what Sony are doing. I would say the thing is with Microsoft, you know, with the Xbox, I think messaging is the real problem. Like, there is a lot of issues that Microsoft have had. You can start saying, oh, the development tools or whatever. You know what, to be honest with you, who gives a crap? Like, whether the Xbox is more powerful than the PS5 or the PS5 is outperforming the Xbox in a specific game, honestly, it doesn't matter if it's 10, 20% better. Let's just say, even if you could just, you know, say, well, this is a 20% better experience than the PS5. Let's hypothetically say you could say that for the vast majority of the games, which isn't really the case, but let's just say it was. But the reality is, the problem with Microsoft, I think, a lot of the time is the messaging. And I think that Spencer actually giving these comments actually, in some ways, undermines a lot of the faith that people have in the hardware and the software. You know, the fact that, for example, even when they're talking about the games that are ported to the PlayStation 5, it's kind of like, yeah, we're only going to do 4 games. Wink, wink. Like, it's like, for my mind, I understand why they're releasing games on the PC as well. But if you're then going to just, if people are under the impression that you're just going to start opening up the ecosystem and selling games on the PlayStation 5, why would you own an Xbox, right? Or if you can just play the vast majority of games on an Xbox, you can run Epic and stuff, then why not just do a PC? Like, I don't know. I'll be very interested to see. And again, this is not me pooing on Microsoft, because I do want good competition in the marketplace. Unfortunately, it kind of feels like there's just not good competition at the moment. It's like Sony, if you want a console, and if you don't want a console, then, you know, PC is the way forward. And even Sony, like, their approach seems to be changing as well. Like, obviously we've just had Horizon Forbidden West, which is a really good PC port. It's going to be interesting. I mean, you know, people are kind of taking the comments from the new Sony CEO, whose name escapes me right now, you know, in different ways. Some are saying, well, he's actually not implying there's going to be any changes on their approach. And others are saying, oh no, definitely games are going to start to come quicker to the PC now and being ported from the PlayStation. I personally don't really know. I still think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But, you know, ultimately, the reality is that when you look at the console market, and you guys can do this, like, seriously, open up a web browser. Look at the number of PlayStation 2s that were sold. Look at the number of PlayStation 3s, PlayStation 1s, PlayStation 4s, PlayStation 5s. Look at the same thing for the Switch, the GameCube, the Wii. You know, go back as far as you want. Like, go back to the bloody, like, ColecoVision if you want. Do the same for the Xbox. There is, like, you know, 60, 70, 100 million. Fine. When you start getting over 110, 120, 130, 150 million, I think it was the PS2 hit like 150. Was it PS2 or the Wii? I can't remember. Anyway, roughly, it's like 150 million. And it's like, it doesn't really break over that. And when you start talking about the cost of game production, and you start saying, well, you know what? Games now, I think it's Spider-Man 2 cost like 200 or was it 250 million to produce? Something ridiculous. And you're still selling roughly the same number of copies. Because obviously the reality is, let's just be really simple about this and say you've got 100 million consoles out there. You know, let's just assume it's 100 million, because when we start dealing with, like, you know, 49.3, it starts to drive everyone insane. So let's just say you've got 100 million consoles. Well, then, if you've got, like, that finite number of consoles, the only thing that you can really do to make more money is, one, sell it to more owners. So, obviously, something like Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to have a higher attachment rate simply because more people want that game. Or you, well, charge more, or you start doing microtransactions and other things. So, you know, the only other way, of course, is to actually release the games at a cheaper cost and have these, like, AA games, which I think would be good as well for the industry. Like, I personally would love shorter experiences. Like, yeah, I don't know, guys. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one. I'm kind of rambling a little bit on this because, honestly, yeah, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one. It's going to be a very interesting time, I think, for the industry over the next couple of years. I will be very interested to see what Sony does for the PlayStation 6. Personally, I suspect that it's still going to be a console. I don't think they're going to be going cloud gaming. I think it's going to be a much later release. I think it's going to be like 2028, bloody hell, I can't speak. 2028-ish. That's what I heard. Obviously, it's going to be more powerful than the next generation Xbox, theoretically, because it's going to release later, unless Microsoft has, like, you know, like an upgrade or something for their console. Who the hell knows? Yeah. I will be very interested to see what happens with the industry. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.